Hey, it's Jordan. I'm here at the Trolls Knoll in Encampment, I guess because it's on a little grassy knoll. And it's pretty jarring. I mean, I guess it's not jarring to you because you see it too much, but this basic little tent city is right next to just really nice new apartments in a really nice area of Seattle. So Matthew, you do a lot of work with these kind of encampments and trying to help alleviate some of this. I mean, the numbers are pretty staggering with homelessness in Seattle. I think a Guardian story I just read said like over 4,000 public school children are homeless or couch surfing or whatever. Can you kind of talk about your involvement with this encampment?
Yeah, well, first of all, the statistic that we're talking about for the 4,000 Seattle public school students, that only counts people who are not necessarily doubled up or living on a couch. Those are homeless children. So they're living in a car, they're living in a camp or in a shelter. So just wanted to make that quick distinction. As far as this work goes, I've been helping in camps for about 2 years now. It's hard because we did a lot of work last year around, there was a tax on big business that we were trying to pass, the head tax, and there was a lot of work around homelessness going there. And in a lot of ways, a lot of folks are really hard hit by homelessness as a crisis. You know, there's poverty that like literally in the streets. You've got your luxury condo across the way from people living in tents, and there's this huge wealth disparity that's happening. As far as the sweeps go, I think it is a response to the camps that is inappropriate.
When you say sweeps, just the city's coming in, basically evicting people.
Right. So, when I'm talking to the city, I make very sure to call it an eviction because right now in Washington State and the city of Seattle, we're doing a lot of great work on eviction reform, and we've highlighted some great places. There's a study called Losing Home that was done by the Seattle Women's Commission and the King County Bar Association. They came out a couple months ago that showed that so many people that are coming straight out of evictions are ending up right on the street and then finding themselves in cycles of chronic homelessness. So when I say sweeps, I mean encampment removals. The city calls them encampment cleanups, as if it were just a bunch of garbage that needed to be swept along. Like I said, I prefer evictions myself because it's really what it is. I had a bout with living in my car in and out for about 2 years right out of college, and I did sometimes have housing, but I was evicted twice in that period. And when I see the city's notice come up for these encampment removals, I really see it kind of the way I felt in those times that I was evicted. And there's 72 hours notice generally, maybe a week that's given notice. I don't think that's really enough time to get past even the first stage of grieving and start thinking about where you're going to go, what are you going to do with your things. And the city doesn't provide a place for them to go. Now, the city will say that they do. They're trying to bring people inside. That's shelter service. In a lot of places, that's not really adequate for the needs of the people that are here in these camps, or really, I think, anyone's actual needs as a human. Like some of the shelters are 24-hour shelters that you have a cubicle and a bed and place to store your things in a locked area, and that works for a lot of folks. But when they are removing these camps, they have to have at least enough shelter space for each one of the campers before they come and remove the camp. So some of those spaces are on the floor in the lobby at City Hall, where they have about 100 air mattresses lined up 12 to 18 inches away from each other. They throw a plastic bag on there that has a blanket and a pillow. But when you are staying in that shelter, you're not going to get a good night's sleep. You are in by 9 p.m. and you are kicked out at 6 a.m. And then it's so easy to catch sicknesses from other people around because it's in such a tight capacity. That's just one example of what they're naming as an acceptable shelter bed for someone who, as you can see with these camps, people have their whole lives here. Now, the navigation team that performs these encampment removals, they do offer storage space. There's a big warehouse in SoDo, in the SoDo neighborhoods here in Seattle, that they have a very detailed way of keeping track of people's things. But only about 14% of people can actually go back and access their things for whatever reason.
So I'm going to call this what I think it is. This kind of looks like a class cleansing of the city of Seattle, the state of Washington, but more specifically plutocrats. This is my opinion, I'm not asking you. Basically trying to push out anyone that's not making $100,000 a year, software developer, computer programmer. Nothing wrong with making $100,000 a year, nothing wrong with having expertise or skills. This isn't to say they shouldn't be able to live in Seattle, but it seems like the city of Seattle and Washington State has really made a choice to bend over backwards for Amazon, for Boeing, for these multi-billion, well, Amazon's now trillion, instead of affordable housing, job programs, and you see it. I mean, it's a tale of two cities wherever you go. Gentrified apartment condos next to tent cities. What does that say kind of about this country? Forget the state, but this country, when you have this, and it's not just Seattle. Look at San Francisco, Portland, Chicago. 14 homeless people just died in the polar vortex. How are we allowing this to happen?
Well, I think that goes really deep into systems problems that we have here in America. I would push back that it's not just a class cleansing, it's a racial cleansing as well. In the homeless population here in Seattle, in the last count that came out, they do a one-night count in the winter every year. There were 29% of the homeless population were African American people. Only 8% of the entire population of Seattle is African American. Same thing with natives. We've got Alaska natives and indigenous people that are living here in Seattle. They make up less than 1% of the entire population of the city, and they make up about 7 or 8% of the homeless population. So, we got to talk about this from not only a class lens, but as well from a race lens. And now, if we are going to look at it from both of those lenses, and about Boeing is like, they're not necessarily my great friends. They held the city hostage about 20 years ago themselves, but they made a responsible decision when they built their headquarters. They built in the suburbs. They built in Renton, Washington, right? Sure, the airfield is here in Seattle, but they built their headquarters and they built those homes down in Renton where there was less already happening. Amazon decided to plunk themselves right in the middle of South Lake Union neighborhood, a busy neighborhood in Seattle, immediately gentrifying a lot of people. I think that if we're going to look at it through a race and class lens, then we have to look at what Amazon is doing as a colonizing force in Seattle, right? And we're not necessarily talking about European settlers coming onto shore, but we are talking about these people who are coming in and bringing people from outside and pushing out the people that already are there, and putting them in situations like this where they're literally dying in front of them on the streets, where you have people living in tents and these luxury apartments, where you have super high wealth. We have 3 of the most wealthy people in the world within a 5-mile radius of where we're standing right now.
Jeff Bezos,
Steve Ballmer, until recently Bill Gates, rather. And Paul Allen was also one of those. He just recently passed away. But we have immense wealth here in Seattle because it's a tax shelter state.
No income tax.
No income tax in Washington. So it attracts really wealthy people because they might have to pay a sales tax or a property tax, but that is just pennies for them. Whereas someone who's living on the street, that 10 cents on a dollar actually really affects them. That's 10% of the already low to no income that they're already making. And that's every transaction. We're talking every burrito, every drink, every toothpaste, toothbrush, whatever. You get hit on that, and it really affects the poor in Washington State at a much more disproportionate rate.
And of course, I've only spoken with 1 or 2 people, but the impression I get from the numbers, a lot of these people actually want to work. A lot of the homeless here want to work or have some college study. They've studied in college or they have degrees. But when prices have gone up, I think 70% housing went up in the last couple of years. They can't afford it.
Right. Yeah, it's really insane. Imagine this situation. You're living in homelessness because you were just evicted. You couldn't make the $400 rent increase that your landlord just imposed on you for a new lease. And suddenly you've become homeless. You tried the shelters, you got sick. You tried the shelters, you couldn't sleep because someone was having a mental health break that night and no one slept in that shelter. You maybe just got released from prison and can't get housing because you've got some sort of criminal act on your record. Those people end up here oftentimes, and if you go to a job interview and you haven't had access to a shower, to a toilet, how are you going to? How is the person supposed to get a job in this environment? So about 30% of the homeless population is employed, but another 70% of the homeless population is disabled. So the health effects of living outside have really impacted a lot of these folks. And like I said, 70% are living with disability and may not even be able to work at this point. Now, obviously, there are many differently abled people that can work, and in this population as well. But when you're looking at the numbers like that, it's pretty staggering.
And as a society, most of us have iPhones. We don't worry about how are those iPhones made. Who are making them? In what factories?
Yeah.
How hot is it in those factories? Is there a role to play here from people, including myself, who order from Amazon all over this country, all over the world, for expedience, comfort, convenience? You get good products, cheaper in a lot of cases, but most of these, I would venture to guess, most people ordering from Amazon don't see this or don't know about it.
Right. I think that's a tricky question, right? I order things on Amazon sometimes. My individual contribution of $5 here when I really needed that thing for this one thing, right? Like it's not my favorite, but it's the truth, right? I needed it on my doorstep the next day. It was there, and I try to avoid to do that as much as I can. If I can get it locally, I will absolutely go to a local small business. I've got a story for you. I went to a bookstore here, Secret Garden Books on Market Street in Ballard. I get all my books there. They're a wonderful group of folks that run a great business. And they had this one book that I was looking for, and I think the price was going to be like $8 on Amazon, and it was going to be $24 at the bookstore. And I was stressed out, and not in the best mood that day anyway. So when she told me it was $24, I was like, oh, I'll just go buy it at Amazon. The look at her face when I said that, it looked like I had really struck a heart chord there. So I walked out, got halfway down the street, and then I said, no, I have to buy it here, turn it around, and do that. And I think if we can get people really to think about their local communities, shopping local, and staying together as a community, I think that's really where we come up against this. And a lot of the stuff that Elizabeth Warren's been talking about with the antitrust work that she's been doing, I think that's the right way to go. We shouldn't have these huge mega corporations ruling our lives.
Lastly, obviously Trump with his ridiculous national emergency, which isn't an emergency on the non-existent border crisis. You have the Democratic Party nationally. It seems their emergency is Vladimir Putin and Russian trolls online. Yeah. I mean, this seems to me to be an actual emergency. Again, not just Seattle. I mean, we're talking many, many cities now, and it's not even just homelessness. It's people basically living in squalor if they have a home over a roof over them. Wouldn't this be an emergency if it's a nation? Because I actually call it the United Corporations of America. I don't even call it a country anymore because it's been bought. Yeah. I mean, this seems to be an emergency. How do you have a nice gentrified country, couple blocks with nice apartments, nice homes, Starbucks and bars and restaurants? I was just downtown, First Avenue, where all the restaurants and bars are, and you see people sleeping out in sleeping bags, and people just walking by. I mean, they do that all over the country, but there's really just like, it's been normalized here where that's just a price of business for Amazon to be here. Do you consider this an emergency, a crisis? I mean, what should people do? What should people think?
Yeah, it is absolutely an emergency. You know, the city of Seattle declared it an emergency, a public emergency about 3 years ago, and hasn't really been able to get their hands on it. I think there's been a lot of, there's this thing called the Seattle process where we work and work and work and work and we try to find consensus and then we budge just a little bit, right? And that doesn't work for this kind of thing. We have to radically change how we think about things. And when I say that this is a crisis that's repeated itself, 200 years ago, this was the native population's problem, right? And I think that if we're going to look at solutions, we need to look at Native leaders in our community who have been dealing with this issue with displacement, with gentrification, and being unhoused just in general and discriminated against. And we need to look to their leadership and see what they're doing. I think if we can finally end urban indigenous homelessness, then we can start really unpacking what's going on in the other communities that are affected by it. You know, just here we are, we're on stolen Duwamish land, a couple of white guys.
How could people get involved? I mean, not just in Seattle, but people watching in their communities as far as the homelessness problem, but also just if they want to fight against, you know, corporatization and gentrification.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to get involved. Personally, I'm the lead organizer at the Seattle Transit Riders Union. We were working a lot on the head tax campaign. We did a lot of the community coordination and leadership there.
Would have taxed Jeff Bezos like 1/10 of something. It would have been a drop in the bucket for Amazon.
Yeah, the final legislation that we landed on and passed was $250 per employee per year. That would raise about $43 million to build permanent housing, permanent affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, homeless services, as well as pay workers that work in this industry, you know, work at shelters, that work as caseworkers, pay them above the $15 minimum wage, get them to a real living wage so that they can feel secure in their jobs and really devote their lives to this work. So we did that work, and we are still engaged here in Seattle at the county level and at the state level on making sure that we are making our investments towards affordable housing that stays permanently affordable, making sure that eviction reform is happening, as well as we're working on a lot of great transportation issues like decriminalizing fare evasion. So if you want to get in touch with us, go to transitriders.org, and we would love to get you plugged in. We've got a lot of stuff we're working on right now.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statusquo.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statusquo.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.